Zeitgeist Whisperer. Monday, April 20, 2026. Winning doesn't end the wanting. What does the world's spirit feel like today? The weekend moved like someone cleaning out a house they're about to leave. You watched the numbers climb and climb, 750 million for a plumber in space, 500 million for an astronaut alone, and felt the strange vertigo of plenty during unease. The marathoners run Boston while the news cycles through loyalty tests and pasta crimes. Your feed serves you Coachella clips of people recording experiences they forgot to have. Somewhere, a wife at 85 still takes breath away. The moon hung there, searched by thousands, and you looked up too, looking for something that hasn't changed. Perhaps we're not nostalgic for what was. We're nostalgic for a time that's finished, closed, accounted for, safe from further damage. The present has no such mercy. So what's coming? The Masters of the Universe trailer is clocking numbers, and after a weekend where audiences lined up for Clear Heroes and Fight Club's re-release crossed $100 million, He-Man's moral simplicity reads as a radical proposition. The test: can sincerity scale without irony's permission? Now the data. The weekend's verdict is unmistakable. Audiences want to feel mastery over chaos, whether that's a plumber saving galaxies or a science teacher collabing with an alien. Super Mario Galaxy at $747 million and Project Hail Mary at $573 million aren't competing. They're the same story, told at different reading levels. Competence obsession is having its moment. Meanwhile, Fight Club crossing $100 million in re-release suggests something uncomfortable. The film's critique of masculine crisis plays now as comfort food. The repressed has become the expressed, and nobody's sure what that means. Let me pull out what matters most. That $747 million for Mario, that's comfort IP achieving what original blockbusters cannot: permission to feel good without justification. You don't have to defend why you're there. The nostalgia is built in. The permission is pre-granted. Project Hail Mary's 82% satisfaction score tells us something different. Audiences trust Gosling alone more than they trust most ensembles. Hard sci-fi scales when the human stays human, when the equations serve the emotion instead of replacing it. And then there's Fight Club at 84% satisfaction. 27 years later, the irony has collapsed into earnest nostalgia. We're watching a critique of consumer masculinity as consumer product, and we're okay with that now. The Ouroboros has swallowed itself completely. One more number worth sitting with. "Don't give me hope" was the weekend's dominant meme. Hope itself now requires warning labels. Which brings us to what's moving underneath. The weekend's heroes solve problems alone. Ryland Grace, Mario, even Fight Club's narrator imposing order through destruction. Audiences pay to watch people who know exactly what to do. Competence is the expressed theme, visible everywhere, purchased gladly. But behind the competence fantasy hides something we're not naming: the terror of needing others. Hampshire College closes. Institutions fail. The astronaut survives because he trusts no rescue. We practice self-reliance because we've stopped believing help is coming. Dependency is the shadow, and we're paying good money not to look at it. The integration, the story we actually need, isn't the lone genius. It's the moment the capable person admits they cannot do this alone, and that admission becomes the turning point rather than the defeat. The second pattern is even closer to the bone. Nostalgia is everywhere. Fight Club returns. Mr. Brightside climbs the charts. Mario comes home. The past isn't just referenced, it's repurchased, re-experienced, held close like a talisman. But nostalgia is mourning in costume. The past we're buying tickets to wasn't actually better. We just knew what we'd already lost. The present's losses remain uncounted. Grief is the shadow here, and we dress it in vintage clothing so we don't have to feel it as grief. The stories that might actually help us are the ones that let nostalgia become elegy. Works that stop pretending the return to the familiar is the triumph, and instead let characters grieve forward instead of escaping backward. This is where Erich Fromm comes in. In 1941, he published Escape from Freedom, and it explains this weekend completely. Fromm identified a paradox. Freedom creates anxiety, and anxiety makes us flee back toward structures that constrain us. His analysis describes exactly why audiences flock to both Mario's cosmic playgrounds and Fight Club's rituals of submission. Both offer escape from freedom's burden, one through childhood's permission to play without consequence, the other through discipline's permission to stop choosing. Fromm distinguished between freedom from, escape from constraint, and freedom to, the capacity for authentic self-creation. The competence fantasy we're purchasing offers the first, disguised as the second. Ryland Grace appears free because he's supremely capable, but his freedom depends on radical constraint. Alone on a ship with no memory of who he was, no choices about meaning, only the problem in front of him. The weekend's numbers suggest we're exhausted by freedom to and purchasing freedom from in prestige packaging. Fromm would recognize this flight pattern. He'd also warn where it leads. A few classic callbacks if you want to go deeper. Castaway, the original competence in isolation fantasy. The Truman Show, spectacle as prison. The audience who loves you is the wall. And Wall-E, nostalgia that becomes elegy, spectacle that earns its intimacy in the smallest gestures. Now, the craft close. Robert Richardson, the cinematographer, shot The Aviator using different film stocks to track Howard Hughes's psychological states across decades. Early scenes mimicked 2-strip Technicolor. Middle period used 3-strip. Final sequences went cold and contemporary. I wanted the technology of each era to feel like memory itself, Richardson told American cinematographer. The technique makes nostalgia visible as distortion, not preservation. Here's the scene. Hughes screens Hell's Angels for a theater full of critics. He's achieved his impossible vision: real planes, real danger, real spectacle. The film within film dazzles. Then Scorsese cuts to Hughes alone afterward. The theater empty. The victory already past tense. Hughes doesn't celebrate. He's already calculating the next obsession. That's the structural turn. Spectacle completes, and completion fails to complete him. Richardson's warm, period-accurate palette suddenly feels like a cell. The craft achieves what the weekend's data whispers: winning doesn't end the wanting. Why today? Because $747 million proves audiences will show up for the spectacle. And because the memes about recording the experience they forgot to have prove we know showing up isn't the same as arriving. Stay curious, read widely, make something real. This has been the Zeitgeist Whisperer.